So let's have a prayer, and then we will dig into our study in Proverbs. God, we come before you now, and we thank you for this time that we can be together and study your word. I ask you to be especially at this time with the family of the Blackburns, with the passing of Ted's cousin Eric. Continue to bless his family and give them strength in this difficult time. It is such a hard thing for them to go through. Please bless them and give them encouragement. We ask you, please continue to be with Bud and others in our congregation who are struggling with illness and COVID and various things. Please give us healing and strength. We know that you can and that you are looking out for us all the time. As we study your word tonight, please give us insight into your truth. Give us wisdom as we seek to understand your guidance for us. As we study Proverbs, we thank you for the inspired wisdom that it gives us, and we thank you for the people who wrote it down for us and who have preserved it for us so that we would have it for ourselves. We love you, and we thank you most of all for your son's sacrifice that unites us and brings us together no matter where we are. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so check that everything is working. J.J. Blevins has COVID. That is a thing that I just got in a text. So be praying for J.J. Blevins and his family with COVID. Dawn says that Ted's cousin passed away on the 23rd. Wasn't on Christmas, I think is what that text means. So some updates on that. Okay, as we are going to study Proverbs tonight, let's see here. We're going to start with the introduction. Guarding your heart. That's what we're going to talk about tonight, which you may have seen if you looked at the video title on the video. Guarding your heart. This is a concept or an idea in the book of Proverbs, as we've gone through Proverbs in a topical fashion, right? We've talked about money and finance, we've talked about words, and we've talked about how to get wiser, and we talked about some idea about friendships and who you hang out with and your companions. Tonight we're going to talk about guarding your heart. This is a phrase or an idea that it comes up a lot in Proverbs, the idea of the heart, right? The heart, not the organ, right? But the seat of human emotion or the seat of the soul, the seat of the psyche, right? Who you are. This is your inner being is what the Proverbs are talking about here. So we'll start with Proverbs 4:23 through 27, which it has this phrase, the ESV uses keep instead of guard. Proverbs 4:23 through 27. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you crooked speech, put devious talk far from you, let your eyes look directly forward, and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet. Then all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. The heart, the idea of the heart here. Keep your heart with all vigilance. That is, with being careful about it, being steady and alert about it. And then the idea of the path. There's a lot of talk about the path here. The path of your life. And it's interesting how he says this, out of the heart flows the springs of life. And then he talks about the direction that you go. You will go the direction of your heart. Jesus puts it a different way, right? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. That is, from the inner being, the things we care about, the things we prioritize, the things we think about, the way we act. These form the direction of our life. So we need to keep our heart, guard our heart, cultivate particular attitudes we're going to talk about tonight. Attitudes that we should be cultivating, attitudes we should be avoiding, things we should be prioritizing about our deepest selves. And ultimately the goal, the point is that we will not swerve from the right or the left. We will turn our foot away from evil, right? Let's read another one, Proverbs 3:1 through 4, another introductory text here. My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. It's interesting, let your heart keep my commandments, not just the things that you do, but in ourselves, right? The things that we think about and the things that we care about. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So then you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. There's a lot of things he talks about here, but the sort of the summation of it, right? you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. The way that we live our lives and the things that we care about and what we write on the tablet of our hearts. I love that phrase. And what are we writing on the tablets of our heart here? Steadfast love and faithfulness. So this idea of guarding our heart or keeping our heart, this is about who we are in the deepest way and how we become the kind of people that we want to be, right? That's, I think, what we're driving at in these Proverbs. So I have one more text, introductory texts that we will read. Proverbs 28:14. Blessed is the one who fears the Lord always, but whoever hardens his heart will fall into calamity. The phrase hardens his heart, this is a phrase that occurs all over the Bible. This is the opposite of guarding or keeping your heart, hardening your heart. That is, hardening your heart against what? Against what the Lord is trying to do. Because we think about this from a New Testament context, right? A Christian context. There are some things different about our relationship with God than at the time the Proverbs were written. So we're thinking about this from the Christian context. And of course, we're thinking about this in the context of the work of the Holy Spirit, who lives in our hearts. Not in the organ, right? Not in the physical heart in my chest, but who lives in my inner being. And he is working in my heart. Unless, what? Unless I harden my heart. As opposed to softening my heart, the phrase that's used, again, fairly frequently in the Bible, has to do with allowing God to change us into the kind of people that he wants us to be. And it goes back to that first line, whoever fears the Lord always is blessed. And so we're going to go through these Proverbs, and I do think in a very real sense, these Proverbs, the verses we're going to read tonight, are part of God's way of shaping our hearts. He's going to use these texts if we let him. One of the reasons I pray before we have this Bible study, I pray that we will be open, that we will receive the words, that we will understand the words, because these words are part of that mechanism by which, if we do not harden our hearts, God will shape us and change us into the kind of the people that we have the potential to be. So, the first way, the attitude that we should cultivate, or the way we guard our heart or keep our heart, the first one is pursue truth and honesty. This is all over Proverbs. And the reason I had it originally just be honest, but it's not just about being honest and saying right things. It's about pursuing truth in not just what we say, but what we think and what we know. There's a lot of information about, or a lot of verses about knowledge in Proverbs. We'll group these in sort of together because it is all over and overall, that's what I was looking for. It is overall an ethos of truth, not just in what we say, but what we think. So let's read a couple verses here. Proverbs 6:16 through 19. And if you have comments, feel free to jump in at any time, either on chat or you can message me, or you can put it in YouTube chat. Proverbs 6:16 through 19. There are 6 things the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. These are things the Lord hates, right? Things that the Lord finds to be an abomination is the way that the text uses it. And there's a lot of different things here, but twice, 2 out of these limited things, 2 have to do with lying or dishonesty, right? A lying tongue and then a false witness who breathes out lies. God cares enough about lying that he cares about it enough to include it twice in this list of things that the Lord hates, right? Don't you think lying might be something that God despises? And it's interesting, the heart that devises wicked plans, that it's not just about the sort of in the moment lies, right? Because we have in the moment lies, I think sometimes. Somebody asks us a question and we just sort of lie off the cuff and we weren't really thinking about it and just sort of happened. But the heart that devises wicked plans, that prepares to do wicked, This is a thing that's intentional, a thing that we're thinking about not just in the moment, but we're premeditating our wickedness, right? Let's read a couple other verses here. Proverbs 12:20. Deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil. This goes back to what we just read. A heart that devises wicked plans. Well, deceit is in the heart of those who devise evil. But those who plan peace have joy. This is the opposite. So if in the list of the things that the Lord hates, we have a heart that devises wicked plans, the opposite is what? A heart that plans peace. And the heart of wickedness comes from deceit. Ultimately, fundamentally, being against the truth, lying to those and refusing to accept the truth is at the core of this idea. Let's read another verse. 15:14. The heart of him who has understanding seeks knowledge, but the mouths of fools feed on folly. The heart of him who has understanding. This is the kind of heart we're trying to cultivate, right? Seeking knowledge. What kind of knowledge? True knowledge, presumably. Just the word knowledge that's used here, which we would typically associate with information or facts, right? As opposed to insight or understanding. We typically have that sort of definition. We think about wisdom of being the application of knowledge, but the heart of understanding seeks knowledge. So it's not just what we say, but what we think. We need to think true things and say true things, and that will help us have this heart that plans for peace. Because fundamentally, truth is a thing that should bring, and hopefully will bring, peace. Let's read another verse. 15:28. The heart of the righteous ponders how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil things. Now, again, this is not just limited to truth and untruth. This could be also cruelty and kindness, which there's a whole section of Proverbs on cruelty and kindness. We'll talk about a different week. What do we see here? Pondering how to answer, in large part because I want to have the answer that is appropriate for the situation, right? That's going to be what is true and helpful. And again, thinking about these things in a very intentional way, the word ponder there. And what would I pour out? How would I know what to answer? How would I know what to say? Well, we'd go back to this. The heart of him who has understanding seeks knowledge. I would only know how to answer if I had sought the knowledge ahead of time, right? So if I'm a person of truth, a person who is honest, a person who is seeking correct information about any number of variety of things so that ultimately I can say the thing in the moment that is right and good. One more verse I think I have in this section. A man of crooked heart, this is 17:20. A man of crooked heart does not discover good, and one with a dishonest tongue falls into calamity. And ultimately this is, I think, the point that the writers of Proverbs, of which there are several, the point that they're trying to make, although I think we've just read Solomon so far, the heart of dishonesty leads to ruin. It'll break your relationships. It'll break your reputation. It'll break your ability to network and gain more friends and do well at work, right? Because at work, people will know that you're not trustworthy. And it can lead to all sorts of problems in our lives. The calamity of life that comes from not being an honest person. So in our heart, as we're thinking about guarding our heart, because we know that it's going to lead to the kind of life that we have as the kind of person that we are, a person who values truth and honesty. That's number one. Number two, the second thing we're supposed to be doing here, develop a wise view of the wicked. And we're going to look at a couple of texts, I think just two in this section, that are particularly interesting in the book of Proverbs. How we think about the wicked person, or the person who mistreats us, or the person who does bad things to us, or just generally thinking about the lost person. And maybe you're thinking about the lost as that's a good person, but thinking about the lost person perhaps, how you view persons who are opposed to God is really what I'm driving at here. Let's read a couple verses. Why is that not working? There we go. Proverbs 23:17 through 19. Let not your heart envy sinners, but continue in the fear of the Lord all the day. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. Hear, my son, and be wise, and direct your heart in the way. Direct your heart in what way? Well, that would be contrasted with the way of the sinner, right? and the one that we're envying. Do not let your heart envy sinners. And this is a temptation that we have, right? And we're thinking about the innermost being, the things that we care about, things we prioritize. And if we care about earthly success, we care about certain materialistic things, then we might be envious of the sinner who maybe gets ahead because of dishonesty, or gets ahead because he's cheating, or gets ahead, any number of things that a sinner might get ahead on. And you think, man, if I could be like that sinner. The implication is you can't be, because you fear the Lord, because that's the contrast here, right? Continue in the fear of the Lord. You fear the Lord. It changes your behavior. Maybe that doesn't allow you to do the things that this sinner is doing that gets them ahead in life. And so you start to be envious. And what is that envy going to do if we're in our hearts thinking about how much we just want what the sinner has? That's going to lead us to not continue in the fear of the Lord, right? But the contrast, there is a future, your hope will not be cut off. The implied thing is the hope of the sinner will be cut off. Hear, my son, and be wise, and direct your heart in the way of the Lord, right? So as we think about this, developing an appropriate view of the wicked, which is, I think, a large part of guarding our heart, keeping our heart from envy, keeping our heart from jealousy, and keeping our heart from looking at the life of the sinner. And I think sometimes we forget. Forget's, it's a difficult word. I don't think we ever forget that we're supposed to be thinking about heaven and hell, right? You're thinking about heaven and hell and eternity. So it's not like you forget that eternity is the goal here. Somehow we just stop thinking about it. Isn't that what it is? Or we don't think about it, and we think about the things of this life too much because they're the immediate thing that I can touch and feel and see. And the future is so far away, and eternity is so far away, and who knows, it's just so vague. And so then I get so wrapped up in the things of this earth that I start to be envious of those who have gotten them by wicked means. Because maybe there's a shortcut there. Maybe it's easier for me to get these things if I'm a sinner. But again, keeping our heart from envy and remembering that there is hope in the way of the Lord. Proverbs 24:17-18. On the other hand, first we think about the successful sinner, quote unquote successful sinner, successful in the ways of the world. Now we think about the opposite, the one who is not successful. Proverbs 24:17-18. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and let not your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest the Lord see it and be displeased, and turn away his anger from him. Turn away his anger from the enemy, right? Now, Solomon, I think, has a different view of this than I would say the New Testament writers have, but the end result is the same. When you think about the wicked, the sinner, the enemy, on the one hand, there's the temptation to be envious because of the earthly success they have. On the other hand, there's a tendency to be vindictive when sinners have things go badly. We feel vindicated, I think. Like, see, I was right to be a Christian and you were wrong. Look at your stupidity and the way of your life. Don't rejoice when your enemy falls. Let not your heart be glad when he stumbles. Now, Solomon puts it this way, lest the Lord see it and be displeased and turn his anger from him. He sees your behavior, your attitude toward the sinner, and be displeased with you, right? That's not the attitude you're supposed to have. You feel this way about the sinner? Well, maybe I'll turn the calamity on you and you'll be the one who stumbles and falls, I think is the attitude he's going for. For us, of course, again, we're thinking about things from the Christian perspective, thinking about things with eternity in mind. It's not a happy thing to think about the lost and the sinner. Well, it shouldn't be. There is a part of me, I will admit, there's a part of me that is really tempted to sort of get this pleasure or think about the vindication of judgment. And I think about the people who have mistreated me, who have mistreated Christians throughout the world. And I think to myself, well, when they stand in judgment, they'll get theirs. And that's a terrible attitude. That is a bad attitude. That's a part of my heart that I need to work on and change. Because that kind of vindictive attitude, I think the Lord is displeased with. And what will it lead to? If that's the kind of attitude I have, it will lead me to mistreat those people on earth, right? Because now I'm thinking about it in eternity, but then I'm thinking about how I can get back at them on earth. And cultivating this bitterness in my heart will lead to, I think, this very sort of angry, bitter behavior. And again, what is the point of this? The way your heart is, that's the way your life goes. The actions that will come. Personally, I really have to work hard not to have that attitude and to feel compassion for the lost and the sinner. Even when calamity befalls them and I think, well, maybe they even deserve it. Not to think that way, but to think, how can I use this as an opportunity to teach them, to reach them with God's love and the gospel? And why would the Lord be displeased? Again, we'll put the verse back up there. Ultimately, why would the Lord be displeased when I am glad at my enemy falling? He loves my enemy just as much as he loves me. And when I am happy at the misfortune of someone, I am happy at the misfortune of someone who God loves. I do think the Lord is displeased at that. So we're developing this duality in our attitude toward the wicked person of not being envious of their success, but not rejoicing over their misfortune, and understanding the appropriate thing that I'm keeping eternity in my mind, I'm keeping eternity in my heart, and then therefore I'm going to try to help that person in eternity to be ready for eternity, right? The third thing then. Oops. Messed up there we go. The third thing, as we are, this will be the last thing, as we think about cultivating or guarding our heart in Proverbs, would be forsake pride. This is the hard one. This is really the core of it, isn't it? Forsaking pride. Proverbs 21, 2 through 4. Let's read this. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes. We've read variations on this, I think, every week in our study of Proverbs. This is a repeated idea. But the Lord weighs the heart. Jim has a comment, I think a little bit behind, that I will look up. He comments Revelation 6, 9 through 11, which I will look up before we move into that. Revelation 6, 9 through 11. Which is I don't know what I'm doing. I can make the text bigger and just pull it up over here. Hold on. How do I make the text bigger in this app? That is the question. There it is. Aha. And then I can just pull it over onto the screen. Well, that's not very big. Maybe you can read it. No, that's not even close to big enough. That's as big as it gets. All right, let's see if you can read that. Oh, now I'm into Revelation 5. Revelation 6, 9 to 11. Way to derail the discussion there, Jim. When he opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of those who had been slain for the word of God and the witness they had borne. They cried out with a loud voice, O sovereign Lord, holy and true, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? Then they were each given a white robe and told to rest a little longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brothers should be complete, who were to be killed as they themselves had been. Now, I think the point, it's hard for me, just Jim puts one verse up on the chat, so it's hard for me to know exactly his intent here. But if I'm looking at this and thinking about our discussion, it is true. There are a lot of passages that talk about the vengeance, the punishment that the wicked will have. That's just inevitably true, because ultimately isn't that one of the main themes of the New Testament is judgment is coming. And that's why the gospel is the good news, right? Because the good news of Jesus is that you can avoid judgment, or not avoid judgment, but you can have a good outcome in judgment, let's say. So there's a lot of text in the New Testament about the judgment of God and particularly the punishment of the wrongdoer. Now, it's interesting that those who had been slain for the word, they cry out, "How long, O Lord, before you judge and avenge?" Because they're looking forward to the judgment of those who had killed them, literally who had killed them. And David has a lot of this in the Psalms, right? As we're thinking about wisdom literature in the Old Testament, David has a lot of this in the Psalms too, about how long will you allow my enemies to persecute me? How long will you allow my enemies to continue in their conquest, right? David talks about that a lot in the Psalms. David contrasted with Solomon, who didn't really face as much of that, I don't think. David, of course, was on the run for a lot of his life. Solomon, who, by that point, the kingdom had been secured by David through bloodshed and war. So Solomon is a king of prosperity and stability, and he doesn't really face as much of that. So I think there's a contrast between David and Solomon there. There is an element and a sense in which we are waiting for the judgment of the wicked. But I will maintain, and I believe this to be true, the appropriate attitude of that, if we're trying to avoid bitterness in our heart, to avoid the judgment that Jesus talks about in Matthew 7, right? Judge not lest you not be judged. The appropriate attitude to have towards the judgment of the lost is sadness. Now, there is going to be an element of vindication. Obviously, I think there is that too. And that's what the Revelation text is really crying out for, right? When will you vindicate us? Essentially is what they're asking. But if we're thinking about guarding our heart, I think it is much more appropriate to the work of evangelism. Because that's the goal, right? The Great Commission, go into all the world and preach the gospel. The goal to seek and save the lost. I do think it is appropriate to cultivate an attitude of sorrow for the lost, even when the wicked people have consequences in their life for their wickedness. It is the gut human reaction to be glad over that misfortune. And I can't say we never feel that, but that attitude is not conducive to evangelism. It's just not. Because the evangelistic person says to himself or herself, how can I reach this person? And being glad over their suffering is not going to help you reach that person with the gospel. Because when you're going to a person with the gospel, you're ultimately wanting them to be in a position where they will not face the eternal consequences for their wickedness. That's the goal of evangelism, is to have somebody not face the consequence of their wickedness. Now, maybe they'll face an earthly consequence. That happens. But every time you evangelize to a person, you are saying, and I know you agree with this, Jim, but I get fired up about it because I see so much of this negativity on the internet. And I see so much vindictiveness in Christians, and it bothers me because the core point of evangelism is to look at a person and say, I want you to escape the consequences of your sin. Isn't that what we're doing at the most basic level? So to have that attitude in our heart, I want you to avoid the consequence of your sin, that is an incompatible viewpoint with, I'm so happy that you're suffering. I'm so happy that you're getting what's due you. I'm so happy that you're getting what's coming to you. So as a Christian, we have to be very careful in our heart to cultivate an attitude of mercy and grace, because that's what's going to allow us to be the most effective at reaching the lost, whom, again, I will reiterate, God loves just as much as you. Right? Anyway, I got a little bit fired up there, and Jim was the catalyst for that, but I'm not directing that at Jim. I'm directing that at this sort of vindictive element of Christianity that I see on the internet that is just so nasty. It is nasty. People who are so happy at the suffering of the wicked, and that's just, I don't think, an attitude that we should be cultivating in our heart. Let's talk about forsaking pride as we are into the last point here. I'll do my fancy splash screen again if I can. Look at that. So fancy. Let's talk about forsaking pride. Proverbs 21, 2 through 4. Every way of man is every way of a man is right in his own eyes. I can see that there's a little red light. I don't know if you can see it. This little red light just showed up on my pack. So my audio may die at a moment's notice. If my audio dies, somebody let me know, because I may not notice when that light goes out. That's the low battery light. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the heart to do righteousness and justice. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable to the Lord than sacrifice. Haughty eyes and a proud heart, the lamp of the wicked. That's such an interesting phrase. Haughty eyes and a proud heart, the lamp of the wicked. What's the lamp of the wicked? Is the proud heart, the thing that lights the path of the wicked. Again, going back to that original thing in Proverbs 4, right, about the directing of the path and keeping on the right path and not going to the right or left. The thing that lights the path of the wicked is the proud heart and the haughty eyes. Those are sin. So, a couple of things here. Again, the reiterated idea. Ooh, people have been texting me. Oh, Don says in Revelation 19, that passage, or Revelation 6, the number of the saints is not complete, was about the idea that others could be added, right? That more saints will be coming. And that, again, that goes back to the idea of our evangelism. Every way of man is right in his own eyes. That phrase that keeps getting repeated over and over in Proverbs 21. I do appreciate the comments, guys. I think sometimes people think I'm frustrated when people make comments and it derails the discussion, but I'd rather have the comments and let the discussion go in the path that it wants to take, rather than me just steamrolling through the text all the time. The primary difficulty in the comments in this format is the 15-second delay between me and you. Anyway, the every way of man is right in his own eyes. This is such a prevalent idea in Proverbs, but the Lord weighs the heart. The Lord, he's the one that weighs. The judges, we could use that word. He weighs the heart. That is, he sees what's in it. He knows what's in it. To do righteousness and justice is more acceptable than sacrifice. Haughtiness and pride are a sin. So again, we're thinking about cultivating the attitude of a heart that would lead us in the right path. Stop thinking so much of yourself. It's basic. It's really simple, really. Stop thinking so much of yourself. Every way of a man is right in his own eyes. Stop thinking your own way is the right way. It's not hard to figure out. Proverbs 16, 1 through 3. The plans of the heart belong to man, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. All the ways of a man are pure in his own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit. Commit your work to the Lord, and your plans will be established. At the end of the day, this is pretty simple here. Stop thinking your way is better than God's way. Like, I don't know what else to say about that, really. Thinking that you've got it all figured out, that you've figured out something that nobody else has ever figured out before. Well, the text has been there for 2,000 years. Well, in Proverbs' case, many more than that. You think that and I say we might have this struggle where we think that we've got it all figured out and our way's the best way and I'm the best person that ever lived and God doesn't have any right to tell me what to do, and we don't really think about these things consciously. But then our attitude bears that out, right? Because we don't want to listen to what God has to say. We don't want to do God's way. We think our way is better. And how do I know that? Because we don't do the way that God has given us. It's not like God is silent about how to live your life and the things that make a life better. And yet we still want to do it our own way. And what is the point? Commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. The answer of the tongue is from the Lord. The Lord weighs the spirit. Might I suggest, and I've said this before and I'll say it again, that God who made you knows what is better for your life than you do. Don't you think that might be true? That God knows more than you do as the all-knowing creator of the universe? So when he says to live a particular way, that way would be the best way. Pride in our hearts is what will, more than anything else, lead us down that wrong path. The path that leads to calamity is a word I really like, calamity. It's almost an onomatopoeia. Calamity comes from thinking that your way is the best way, fundamentally. So look at my notes here. So we go through these. Let's do a little recap here as we think about guarding our hearts in Proverbs. Number 1, pursue truth and honesty. Number 2, develop a wise view of the wicked. And number 3, forsake pride. Those are the things I think that, now there's more that we could talk about here, but there's only so many verses we can read in one night. I think these are the ways that we can really develop a heart that will lead us in the right path. And again, the point of it in Proverbs, the reason why it's so important is this. Guard your heart because it's your true self known by God. And how many, we just read a couple of them. The Lord is the one that weighs the heart, that weighs the spirit. He's the one that knows. Proverbs 29 through 11, who can say I have made my heart pure, I am clean from sin? What's the answer? The implied answer is nobody, right? Unequal weights and unequal measures are both alike an abomination to the Lord. Even a child makes himself known by his acts, whether his conduct is pure and upright. It's interesting. The implied answer to the original question is nobody, but then he does go on to say, you know what kind of a person is by the way they act. And how do we act? We act out of the abundance of our heart. Not just the words come out of the abundance of our heart, but our actions come out of the abundance of our heart. It is not hard to tell what kind of person you are. We think we're so good at tricking people. We think we're so good at appearing to be righteous when we're really not. It's not hard to figure it out. Even a child. And really, when we come right down to it, I'll read the second one first, 15:11. Sheol and Abaddon lie open before the Lord. How much more the hearts of the children of man? You're not fooling God. 27:19, as in water, face reflects face, so the heart of man reflects the man. Who you are in your heart, the things that you care about, the things you think about, the things you prioritize, the things you spend your time on, that's who you are. And God knows it. Your deepest inner part of yourself is bare before the Lord. Not that we're perfect, but again, we're pursuing these things that we've talked about, right? Trying to be more honest, trying to learn more truth, trying to view the wicked in the right way, not be envious, not be overzealous in our joy of their suffering. We're trying to put ourselves in the appropriate place and not think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think. We could put that text up there, actually, now that I think about it. The Romans 12 text, which I don't have in my notes, but I will bring up because we've referenced similar things several times. This is great content, me looking at the other screen while I look for a verse. Romans 12, let's begin in verse 14 here. I know it's not as big. I hope you can read some of it. Actually, can I make this? I can't make it any bigger, though, unfortunately. We'll start in verse 14. Bless those who persecute you. This is Romans 12. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. It's interesting how many of these verses, how many of these things that Paul says in Romans 12 are exactly the things we've read in Proverbs. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse them. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be haughty, but associate with the lowly. Never be wise in your own sight. Repay no one evil for evil. Give thought to do what is honorable in the sight of all. If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Beloved, never avenge yourselves, but leave it to the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him something to drink, for by doing so you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. That is a great summation Is that working? Oh, there it goes. Ooh, look at that. That's loud. Anyway, lost the audio halfway through the prayer probably. God heard it. Maybe you can read my lips later. So, sorry about that, guys. We will continue. We'll have worship on Sunday, digitally only. So, sorry about losing the audio halfway through the prayer, but I'm not going to pray again. You guys can pray, and I encourage you to pray on your own after this. That's it for us tonight. We almost made it without losing the battery life. Have a good rest of your week. Hope everyone who has COVID is feeling better and recovering. And I hope that you are going to have a good rest of your week as we are, again, trying to get through a difficult time. We're all trying together, right? So somebody asked this earlier, I'll cut this out of the video at the end, but somebody asked this earlier about contribution. Don't bring your contribution up this week because everybody in the office was exposed to COVID. So you can bring your contribution by for that next week. I think that'll get us out of the window for the spread. So I guess you could bring it up. I could just leave and you could just sort of come in and drop it off. I don't know, however you want to do that, but have a good rest of your week. We love you guys and God bless.